My name is Akili Hight, and wanted to introduce myself, let you know a little bit about me. Born and raised in Los Angeles, I graduated from St. Bernard's High School in Playa del Rey and went on to Cal State Northridge, where I majored in engineering for the first 3 semesters at least. Uh, that's when I decided that engineering is not what I wanted to do. I It wasn't that I couldn't do the work. I did pass 3 calculus classes, and I took the physics and the chemistry, and back then it was Pascal and Fortran for computer programming. So that was before we had object oriented. Uh, but just one day I was in a physics lab, and we were measuring the velocity of a ball going down a slope. And I looked around, and all the other students were very excited about this experiment, measuring the velocity and the acceleration, applying certain formulas. And at that moment, I knew I wasn't excited about that. I was like, what is this? And at that moment, I realized this is not what I wanted to do, and these are not the people I want to work with. So I switched my major to business administration with an emphasis in marketing. And the only reason I chose marketing, well, business administration, because they did have a marketing emphasis. And when I thought marketing at 19, 20 years old, I was just thinking advertising, so creativity. I didn't realize that marketing really meant sales. I mean, obviously there is advertising, there's distribution, there's merchandising. However, the heart and the gist of marketing is sales. And I was far from a salesperson. So ended up graduating, switching my major from engineering to business. Those are both 5-year programs at Cal State Northridge. So that added an additional year to my program because I took math classes in engineering, those calculus classes, the science classes that I didn't need in business, but business had its own set of math problems or math courses and science courses, that is, that I still had to take. Statistics, which was called management science. Uh, Several accounting classes, even though I hated accounting. Uh, Economics classes. I mean, I understand economics in theory, micro and macro, those are relatively straightforward. But when you come to the other two, the higher level economics classes, money and banking, and I forget what the fourth one was, but those are more abstract. And to be honest, economics, that's the only class I've ever failed in my life. And the only reason I failed it is because the professor, he actually wrote the textbook, and he was known for failing like 70 to 80% of the class. And I was warned not to take him, but to me, I said, I don't fail classes. Of course, he's not going to fail me. Sure enough, got an F. First time in my life only time I ever got an F. So I ended up retaking that class with a different professor and got a B. Um, that being said, I finally graduated after 6 long, grueling years. Never took a semester off, never took less than a full load. So every semester I took between 12 and 16 units, and it still took me 6 years. I was exhausted. So I couldn't wait to get to work. When that day finally came and I finally graduated, I was just excited. I did a internship in a program called the Minority Advertising Training Program, and I interned with. I thought I was going to intern with like a Shia Day or what is it, DDB Needham. some of those big advertising agencies. I ended up uh, working for a producer of infomercials. So what I was researching back then, part of my internship, this is back when they called the internet the information superhighway. So my primary job was to um, write and provide reports to executives on the information superhighway, what it was, how it was going to benefit us, how it was going to change the world. This was 1994, 95, and we know that it did change the world, but the hype there was similar to what the hype is now about AI. And so I'm just looking at how there's nothing new under the sun. It's just all cyclical that is. And but yeah, I was always fascinated with technology itself. Um, just another, just going further back, my mother worked for Xerox in the 70s and 80s. So, she had access to email back then. We had a computer. There was something called, well, they called it the Ethernet back then. Not the same as our Ethernet technology that's used in network with the cables, with the cabling, but the Ethernet meaning the predecessor of the internet or the intranet. So my mother used to print stuff off what was the bulletin board back then, probably the closest thing they had then to social media. Um, Employee resource groups, which they didn't call them back then, but the black employees at Xerox, they had their own bulletin board and they would post things about Black history, and opportunities for young people. And my mother would print it out and bring it to me. Uh, and so I was like, oh, okay, this is from the Ethernet. This is a mouse. This is a laser printer. This is the graphical user interface. All the stuff that Xerox either invented or perfected. um, I was familiar with as a young teenager. So with that being said, I grew up using technology. I just didn't realize that I was actually going to make a living later in life in the field of technology. So a few years into my career, started off my last year in college. I worked for a film distributor, a film production and distribution company. It was called Savoy Pictures. Their first movie, probably the most popular movie, the best movie, was called A Bronx Tale with Robert De Niro, Chaz Palminteri, and but yeah, working there, I went to school full time at night my last year in school, and worked full time during the day, and it taught me a lot just about discipline, about staying focused, compartmentalizing things, um, so that when I was at work, I was at work. When I was at school, I was at school. When I was studying, I was studying. So not being distracted. Uh, Later on in life, in my career, maybe 5 years later, when I decided to go back to school to get my master's in information technology, I also went to school full time at night and worked full time during the day. That time I was a fifth grade teacher. If you know about fifth grade or elementary school teaching, you have to teach every subject. It's not just one particular subject. So, I taught math, I taught language arts, I taught science. Um, you know, a lot of reading the manual, leaning on other teachers to help me out. But suffice to say, it was very exhausting. One of the most stressful times of my life. And going to school full time during the day, teaching, bringing work home, grading papers, writing lesson plans. then going to school Monday through Thursday evenings, 3 hours a night, and every other Saturday. Having to do not only homework, projects. Yeah, very exhausting. But once again, I learned I kind of perfected, uh, or as much as possible, that is, the ability to compartmentalize and to focus. And for the first time in my life, which I didn't even know it was possible, I graduated with a 4.0 GPA. The only person in my cohort to do it, because at first, getting A's on these assignments and tests, I thought everybody in my cohort, and there were about close to 20, maybe 18 to 20 people in the cohort of my master's program. And then I realized, oh, no, you guys aren't getting A's? Oh, okay. So, not to brag, but what I'm saying is, it wasn't until I was maybe 30, 31 years old that I realized that I can actually um, excel and become an overachiever. I'm moving forward. My first IT job out of grad school was working for the late great Frank Gehry, the architect, world famous architect, working in his information technology department for about 2.5 years. I realized that I didn't know anything in technology. I was book smart, but there's a difference between theory and practice. And I really learned on the job thanks to the other three members of our department. Relatively, not, I won't say small company, but about 100 employees. So our IT department only had 4 people. So I learned everything from networking, running cables, punching cables down to uh, backup, archive, and recovery. Going into what we called the server room back then, but it was essentially a data center. Knowing why you had to keep the the air conditioning, the coolant, or the cooling system at 70 degrees, and um, disaster recovery, and you know uh, Microsoft Exchange, being an administrator, and Active Directory, and things like that. So it was more of a 360-degree education of technology. Throughout this time, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to be a tech. I wanted to merge my undergrad and my graduate or my master's degree together to customize myself, to customize it towards my own strengths and interests. So, undergrad in business administration, master's in information technology, I figured, well, the best route for me to go is to be a project manager. So, I had a choice of whether it was database administrator, database architecture or design, or networking. These are definitely very important and respectable lanes within technology. I knew for a fact I was not going to be a programmer. So that was never a doubt. Um, I had taken Java, object oriented programming back then, and I understood the logic behind it, but I just knew I never wanted to be a programmer or a coder or developer in that sense. But I wanted to work with all of these professionals. So that's why I chose project management. And I qualified eventually to sit for my PMP, and I've been PMP certified since 2008. So throughout my career, I've worked in obviously architecture, as I mentioned, uh, defense. I went from Frank Gehry to work for Northrop Grumman as a desktop support and then eventually server support. But I kind of fell into healthcare technology because Kaiser Permanente was hiring uh, for their huge, large scale uh, electronic medical records rollout. So they were implementing Epic, and also part of that team, we were implementing uh, or digitizing radiology systems. So taking film, X-ray film, and then digitizing them, and then making them available for the radiologists to view on their PAC systems, picture archive and communication systems, working interfacing with their radiology systems. So throughout the years, I had various positions in healthcare technology. One of the common themes about healthcare, especially in technology, is integration and interfacing. So there are multiple systems. They have to talk to each other. So that means your electronic medical records that holds your patient demographics, has to talk to your billing systems, that has to talk to your lab systems, your radiology systems, your pathology systems, um, and multiple other systems for that matter. And yeah, just having various contract positions throughout the years, really over the last 20 years, 20 plus years, I've had the opportunity to see different cultures, company cultures, different implementations, different use cases. And in hindsight, it's very fascinating. Somewhat frustrating when you're working in the corporations, the corporate environments where, some are not as, I would say, amenable to independent thought as others, but just learning the life cycles and everything that's involved with rolling out enterprise level technology systems, whether it's interfacing or data modernization or analytics or eventually artificial intelligence. So that's the last 30 years of my career in a nutshell on a high level. And just to kind of paint the picture that I've seen a lot. And one thing that I've also done throughout this time in parallel with my technology career was that I've always been a writer. Just naturally, I'm a writer. When I was in undergrad, especially in the engineering program, I recall those general education classes like writing comprehension, or excuse me, reading or creative writing, that is, or freshman comp, or public speaking, or even the more fun classes like cinema. I took a class called Black Images on the Silver Screen, which stuck with me to this day. Those are my like easy classes, you know, as opposed to taking math and solving math problems where there's either a right or wrong answer. Uh, these writing classes, these thinking classes, there was no right or wrong. You can kind of just make it up. It's based on your thought process. It's based on organizing your thinking. From that point on, taking those classes, I've always kept a journal. That's something I always recommend to people. Keep journals. Even if you're not a writer, you should just always write down thoughts because thoughts are coming at you at sometimes hundreds of times or even thousands of times a minute. And if we don't capture those thoughts at that moment, a lot of times they're gone forever. So just jot things down. And then you'll be amazed when you go back and you look at some of these journal entries. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot about this, or I wrote this. But yeah, writing always came naturally to me, and that served me well because eventually, over years, I took a lot of these ideas that I had that I kept in multiple journals, dozens of journals, and I started putting them together, and I realized I was telling a story. So I'm also a published novelist and author of a sci-fi fantasy novel called Lucid. It's about lucid dreaming. So I'm multifaceted, but one thing I wanted to just make the point of, I know who I am at this moment, but it took me a long time to know who I am because I am so multifaceted in a world that tells you to focus on one thing. And some of these ideas, some of these interests, they may seem on the surface to compete with other of these other ideas and interests. But by crystallizing your thoughts, by writing them down and going back and resurfacing these, you start to see the patterns. And what I've found is that a lot of these ideas, these interests that I had, were not conflicting at all. They all aligned. My technology career aligned with my sci fantasy, science fiction interests because it's really all about futurism. And Black science fiction is also called Afrofuturism. So, in closing, I just wanted to say that if you are also um, maybe the word struggling is kind of harsh, but if you are somewhat challenged by ideas that may not seem to flow together or align with what you are supposed to be doing, I can help you to kind of identify who you truly are. Because in the end, it's not about doing what we're told to do, it's doing what we were put here to do. That is who we truly are. We all have a mission here. We all have a destiny. And learning lessons from your past and applying them to your present to create a better future in the process of continuous learning. So never stop learning, never give up. Always keep pressing, stay motivated, stay focused. And I know this is easier said than done, but learn to compartmentalize. Breathe deeply. Meditation is very important. So that's something I also practice. Mind, body, and soul. So that means physical, mental, spiritual. Workout, meditate, pranayama or deep breathing, study. I'm not telling you what to study, but study what you love to study. And also, obviously, have a relationship with the Most High, God, whatever you call the Most High, but that's very important. So stay focused, stay disciplined, stay lucid. And if you like to explore more, go to akilihight.com and book a clarity session with me, or just kind of look around because I have other offers there, and it's not going to cost you anything. And let's work together. Peace out.